He is the Executive Director for OneVoice. That's a global initiative for a negotiated end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
So the Trump administration now says a two-state solution is not something it will insist upon. We're yet to sort of figure out what that means exactly. And that, of course, in an effort to forge peace in the Middle East. So if a two-state solution isn't pursued, and we don't know that for sure, what are the other options and how are the Palestinians likely to respond to this change in decades of US foreign policy?
Well, it's very unclear what alternatives actually exist, and I've never heard a coherent policy for an end to conflict articulated by people who oppose a two-state solution on either side in Israel and Palestine that I think is likely to result in truly an end to violence. And that's what conflict resolution needs to be about, right? Israelis and Palestinians need to decide no longer to be at war with one another. What we're seeing right now in Israel is a pretty marked rise in the annexation movement. We had a conference on Monday in Jerusalem where 7 cabinet ministers and the President of Israel were calling openly on the eve of Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Washington, D.C. for annexation of at least part or maybe all of the West Bank. And it's not clear to me how Israel will maintain its character if that was to happen and how it would prevent the outbreak of really significant violence. And from the Palestinian side, I mean, they've been embracing a two-state solution now for well over 25 years. The international consensus, which took a long time to form, has been for two states. And what I would say to President Trump is, with this conflict particularly, doing no harm is an important principle. Very quickly, things can spiral out of control, and he already has quite a lot on his plate, both internationally and domestically. And I just caution allowing Israel-Palestine to come to the fore again and seeing the sort of violence we've seen in previous rounds.
Yeah, and of course, we don't know what it's going to look like, but what do you think the policy for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict might look like under a Trump administration, given we've already seen these mixed messages on where the U.S. embassy should be located and on Israeli settlements? And we've seen this before, haven't we? During campaigns, candidates, U.S. presidential candidates have said one thing, and then once they've been briefed and once they're in position as the president and understood the complexity of this situation in the Middle East, they have had to walk this back, haven't they?
They have, and that's been the trend up until now. But with President Trump, obviously, the word that everybody keeps using is unprecedented. So I'd caution being certain that we're going to see that happening again. We have his candidate for ambassador to Israel, who is due to be probably confirmed on Thursday, and he himself is an ardent supporter of the settlement movement and is an opponent of a two-state solution. So it all kind of depends upon which voices prevail. I mean, one note for optimism, I suppose, is King Abdullah of Jordan kind of flew to Washington, D.C. unannounced to meet with President Trump. He did so, and we saw immediately after that meeting President Trump speaking in, I would say, more clear terms about the danger of expansion of settlements jeopardizing a two-state solution, and also walking back some of the rhetoric he'd used on the embassy. So to me, and it is very early, it seems as though President Trump's opinion on this is not made up, and he looks to want to do broadly quite a few things in the Middle East. And what you'll find quite quickly is that if you inflame the situation in the West Bank and in the territories, and if you create greater violence and instability, it becomes harder to do things more broadly across the region, because the Palestinian issue, whilst it's fallen away from the very top of the international agenda in the Middle East, it's still something that electrifies the Arab street, and it's something that nobody should be complacent about.
Right, and just finally, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meets with President Trump, what sort of assurances will he likely receive, given the administration's policy doesn't appear to be firmed up yet, and what do you think he's expecting out of this?
I think he's hoping to speak mostly about Iran. I think we heard leaks from his office saying 50% of the meeting will be about that topic, so I think he'll want assurances on that issue. But on Israel-Palestine specifically, I think what he's looking for is some sort of assurance around a softer line on settlement building than was the case with President Obama. I think for President Trump, he needs to kind of maintain the need for Israelis and Palestinians, the citizens, not just the leaders, to be able to move towards a two-state solution or some kind of negotiated end to this conflict, and to caution Prime Minister Netanyahu about allowing more sort of radical elements in his cabinet to inflame the issue, and for us to see 2017 be a year, which, don't forget, is the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, where we see violence come to the fore again. And it's the role of the United States as the main interlocutor in this conflict for so long to prevent that happening. Israelis and Palestinians depend upon it.
All right, John Lyndon joining us there from London, where it is 8:40 in the morning. Many thanks to you.